Imagine not having money for college. Happy Halloween!
Hi!
Hey, so Anna, who are you today?
I am the little boy from It that I can never remember his name.
She's Georgie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who are you today?
Thank you. I'm a witch. I am a witch in need of a new hat. And this is definitely not going to stay up during the entire event, but we made an effort. Some spooky stuff is going around here, as we'll be talking today about scholarships is our topic. And as Anna had mentioned, I can't imagine anything more scary than not having money for college. Can you, Anna?
I cannot.
Whoa.
Nothing scares me more than not having money for college.
Yeah. So on that note, talking about not having, let's talk about having money for college. Let's talk about securing money for college. We're talking about scholarships. So with scholarships, and this is just going to be a little bit of a recap of some stuff that we have already talked about, but the first thing to know when we're talking about scholarships are the different types of financial aid that is available. Scholarships fall in the bucket that we call gift aid. So gift aid is any money for college that once it's been awarded, this is a gift, it's money you don't have to pay back. So once it gets awarded to you, this is yours. This is what people sometimes like to call free money. This is definitely the type of financial aid that students are striving to get because there's no strings attached after you've been awarded the aid. That's your money. You don't have to get back. You don't have to do additional work for it. So like we mentioned, scholarships are a type of gift aid, and they are a type of merit-based gift aid. So with scholarships, typically they're awarded to students based on some type of merit. I'm trying to think, can you think of some different types of merit?
So it could be based on their grades. So once they're applying to colleges, schools might have their own institutional merit-based scholarships. So that could be, oftentimes I get parents asking me, like, my student has really good grades, will that matter? When they're talking to me about it, they're asking me about grants. So it could matter, but when we're talking about scholarships, it's with merit-based scholarships, it's going to be more towards, I think the one I think about the most is going to be their grades and with schools.
Excellent. And that's definitely something that students want to be considering. And that's why we always say it's so important as a high school student that you're keeping up your grades, because not only is it going to affect the different types of scholarships that or colleges you'd be able to apply to, it also affects the different types of scholarships that you may be able to apply for. Additionally, though, I think a common misconception is sometimes people think there are only scholarships out there for students that have, excellent grades, straight A's or B's or whatever the case is, or a really high GPA or very high test scores. However, there's also different types of merit-based scholarships that are available for students based off of a bunch of different things. So I know there's scholarships out there for students that write essays, or if they submit a piece of artwork. There's scholarships that are more like lotteries, where if you put your name in for the scholarship, they'll consider you like lottery style for it. There's also scholarships available for sports and for different activities such as like band, orchestra, and things like that. So it's not just grades and GPA and test scores. There's merit-based scholarships for all sorts of things out there. So don't just think, you might not have the most stellar grades, but there are still definitely scholarships that you could consider applying for.
What's one, I could think of one really interesting scholarship that I saw once. It was literally, it would be a submission to be entered into the scholarship for every 10 cans that the student recycled. So they would take, if they took a picture of 20 cans that they were recycling, then that would enter them into a scholarship.
So that's like the sweepstakes style scholarship. I've seen one like that. It was a very short, you had to write, it couldn't be any longer than how many characters is in a tweet? Is that in a tweet?
No, they upgraded.
I forget. However many characters can be in a tweet. There was a scholarship where if you tweeted out and you had the hashtag on it, if you, whatever it was, they would enter you into the sweepstakes. So everyone that sent out a tweet and it couldn't, obviously exceed the characters and have to have the hashtag on it, but then you'd be entering into a scholarship. That also brings up another point though. When looking at scholarships, there are those big national scholarships and those ones that are like sweepstakes where it doesn't take much to apply for. You just kind of have to do, recycle the cans or send out the tweet and you're being considered for it. Keep in mind though, with national scholarships, the competition pool on those is huge, especially if it's minimal work required. So things like sending a tweet or just like taking a picture of the cans. you're going to have a ton of students that are going to be applying to those types of scholarships. So the odds of you actually getting awarded those scholarships are very slim because the competition pool on them is so huge. So if you want to be applying to scholarships where there's a greater chance of you actually getting awarded them, I highly recommend looking local. Can you think of any, like, did your school or did your area have any local scholarships?
Well, not my area. I worked with a high school that they had an application that was just for their students. So it was an application for scholarships for all of the local scholarships. So any small business that had like a scholarship for them, and students can apply for it. For using that scholarship, it was sort of like the Common App, but it was like the Common App for scholarships for that school. And only students who were from that school would qualify for it. No one else could apply to it, so it wasn't as competitive as outside scholarships. So sometimes, like Haley mentioned, students are looking, if we're looking online, the scholarships that we might find online might be bigger scholarships, and there might be more competition for them. But students often forget that local scholarships are there. I could think of an example that one time one of my colleagues gave me was that he had one of the students apply for a scholarship that a cemetery was offering, like a
local
cemetery by their
cemetery,
house. Yeah. And that's something like as a student I never would have thought to look for. And I think when I talk to students and I ask them like, have you asked the local businesses around you? They never tend to ask. But also I always let them know, like, feel free to suggest one. You know, if the students that are going there after school, they might want to apply. It might encourage them to visit the business more. So feel free to ask them. If they don't have one, be like, have you ever thought of creating a scholarship?
I think you also bring up two other excellent points. When looking for local scholarships, great place to start if you are in high school, check with your counseling office or your college and career center, because typically if people have local scholarships, local businesses like Anna was saying, or community groups within your area have them, they'll typically reach out to the school and let somebody in the counseling office know. But then also just check the places you shop. Like Anna had mentioned, like if there's a local business that you tend to attend pretty regularly, ask them, hey, do you offer any scholarships or do you have any scholarship opportunities? Especially if it's like family owned things like mom and pop shops. A lot of times they'll have a scholarship. Most of the times these local scholarships, they tend to be a little bit smaller. So like the amounts tend to be smaller, like more like in the $1,000 or the $500 range, as opposed to like the full ride scholarships. Again, I cannot stress it enough. We see so many students that'll like scuff their nose at those small scholarships because they're like, oh no, that's not worth, the time and the effort. I would rather go for the full ride scholarship. Keep that in mind though, all students want that full ride scholarship. So again, anytime there's a giant scholarship, you're gonna have a bigger competition pool because, the bigger the amount, the more students are likely to put in the work to actually be awarded that scholarship. So I've seen students that have cleaned up with scholarships and gotten a ton of them by just getting these little scholarships, a $250 book scholarship, a $500 one, a $1,000 one. And they've only been, there was one person that I used to work with that applied for this scholarship, and she was actually under like the GPA threshold for the scholarship, but she still applied anyway and got a full ride to Robert Morris's nursing program through it because nobody else in her school had applied to this scholarship because it was like offered through kind of like a family business type thing, and nobody else applied to it. And so they were able to, because nobody had applied to it the year before, they were able to use those funds towards hers because they hadn't awarded it for 2 years. So then she ended up getting a full ride, even though the original scholarship wasn't for that.
And even again, you reminded me of a good point. When students are discouraged from applying for scholarships because they may seem small, and when we're talking about small, we're talking about like $200, even $50. Keep in mind, if the scholarship requires you to write an essay that's 2-3 pages long, it takes a student about an hour or 2 hours to write this essay. If the scholarship amount that they're gonna award you is gonna be $200 and it took you 2 hours to write that essay, if you really think about it, that's like $100 an hour.
Way more than any part-time job you'll ever find.
Yes, so that's money that could be valuable. That's money that could go towards your education. And then you touched on grants, like the different types of gift aid. When we're talking about grants, that's it's not a scholarship, but students tend to think of it as scholarships as well. But grants, they go towards specific things for in regards to school. So scholarships oftentimes students might be able to utilize that money for other things that the grants won't cover. So even if it's like, again, $200, it could go to miscellaneous expenses for the student. If they run out of toilet paper, then they have those $200 to go ahead and get toilet paper. If they want to take a photography class where they're going to need one of those really nice expensive cameras, then they could go ahead and utilize those $200 for it. So it may seem small compared to what the cost of tuition is in today's day, but it is a huge help for the students in very small ways.
And that's an excellent point. Be sure always, no matter any type of financial aid that you're getting, you want to make sure you're reading the small print of what it can go towards and how to use it and things like that. Because as Anna had mentioned, a lot of the grants, which again, those are need-based, a lot of those are going to say that they specifically go to tuition and fees, or they'll only cover room and board, or they'll only cover whatever the case may be. So you can't use that towards like buying your textbooks.
Yeah.
As Anna was mentioning too, scholarships tend to be a little bit more broad. Most scholarships will say it has to be used towards educational expenses, but not all. There may be scholarships that say you can only use it for tuition, or you can only use it for books, or you can only use it for whatever. So it's so important that when you do get awarded a scholarship or a grant, you make sure you're reading the fine print to find out what educational expenses you can use it towards, and additionally to figure out whether or not it is renewable. So do you want to explain a little bit what it means if a scholarship is renewable?
Yeah, sometimes especially with institutions, they might award a student a scholarship. A lot of the times we see that these scholarships are for freshman students. And they could be amounts up to $3,500. I myself had one my freshman year of college. But I neglected to ask if there was renewal, if I would be able to renew that scholarship. So my sophomore year, those $3,500 were not there anymore. So that might have been an instance where it could have been helpful for me to ask if the scholarship was going to be a one-time scholarship or I would be able to renew it. It'll be the same thing with private scholarships, because most often it'll be you can't renew it. You could apply for it again if they're going to open it up for the second year. But there are scholarships out there that could be renewal.
And it's so important the reason it's so important to see if it's renewable and if it's going to come back year to year is because sometimes with renewable scholarships, they have a criteria for renewal. So they say like this scholarship can be renewed if you maintain a 3.5 GPA, or say you get an athletic scholarship, only if you're going to be staying in the sport will that remain renewable. With those one-time scholarships, it's so important to understand that that's only going to be a scholarship you can count on for that first year, because sometimes we'll see students that get a one-time scholarship, so they're all set for freshman year, but then they didn't realize it was a one-time scholarship. So say it was for $5,000. All of a sudden, their sophomore year, when they're starting back up, they have an additional $5,000. Now it's become an out-of-pocket cost that they either have to figure out how to cover. So they either need to find additional scholarships to fill that gap, or they'll have to pay for it out of pocket, or they might have to take out more in loans to be able to pay for it. But because that scholarship's gone, suddenly now there's a bigger gap than there was for their freshman year, if there was any. So it's super, super important to understand if the scholarship is renewable or a one-time scholarship and what the criteria for renewal is. And something to mention, I totally forgot. When I was, the reason it's also important to understand what scholarships can go towards is because when I was my freshman and my sophomore year, I went to community college for my first 2 years. I applied for an institutional scholarship and I got the institutional scholarship. So it was a full ride to my local community college, which was awesome. So it covered my tuition and fees. But then I also had financial needs, so I got the full Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is need-based because of where the finances were in my family. I qualified for that entire grant. So what that meant, because the Pell Grant can go to anything in the cost of attendance, I got a refund check of the Pell Grant. So that was awesome. It was almost like I had gotten paid to go to school because I was able to get both of the years I was in community college. I had that scholarship covering it, and I got that refund check in the Pell Grant. Because it can go to anything in cost of attendance, I was able to use that to fix my car because that was my transportation. I was able to use that to buy a laptop that I needed, to get all of my textbooks. I was able to use that to get food because you need to eat. So it's the nice thing about it is if you know what it can go towards, you're able to, it really helps you to figure out how you're going to be able to use those funds. Because sometimes I know we get students that get surprised that a scholarship they have might not go to room and board.
Yeah.
And they were thinking, oh man, I was going to use that to pay my off-campus rent or whatever, but they can't because it only goes to tuition and fees. So again, yeah, that piece of it is like extremely important.
And on the opposite side, sometimes we get students who they might have selected when they were applying to the school that they were going to dorm in the school. So they might get a scholarship on their award letter. That's just for students who are planning on dorming. If the student
Dorming. I like it. Make it a verb. They're dorming.
So if the student is going to put on their application that they are going to dorm at the institution, if they're going to utilize their housing option, and then they decide later on, like financially it's not the best thing for me, or it's not something that I want, and they see that scholarship on their award letter, if the student doesn't actually stay with them as part of their housing plan, I don't want to bring back dorming. If the student
Live on campus.
Lives on campus, there you go. Thank you. If they live on campus, then if they won't live on campus, that money will be taken out.
Mhm.
So it'll be a gap. They'll see a gap on there. And you mentioned cost of attendance. I know we talked about it in other Facebook Live events, but I just wanna like
Cover it.
bring back what cost of attendance is.
It's important. So
Yeah.
bring it back.
Bring
So
it back.
cost of attendance, typically we have 5 things. Let's go back and forth. What's the first thing?
Tuition and mandatory fees.
Tuition and fees. The next thing is room and board,
Transportation.
books and supplies, and then miscellaneous living expenses. I did that really weird.
What includes miscellaneous living expenses?
That's an excellent question, Anna. Miscellaneous living expenses is anything that you need to survive. So if you need to pay for food with miscellaneous living expenses, toiletries, if you need more shampoo, deodorant, toothpaste, all of that stuff, that all goes into living expenses. So basically things that you need to sustain yourself. And that's everything that goes into the cost of attendance. Remember, direct fees are typically only the things, or direct fees are only the things that are paid directly to the institution. So that's
in order
like
to attend.
Yeah, so that's like tuition and fees. If you do not pay tuition and fees, you are not going to be allowed to attend the school. So with direct expenses, it is extremely important when you're looking at how you're going to pay for the cost of living or how you're going to pay to attend school. You need to make sure that you're covering all of your direct expenses. Otherwise, they are not going to let you live on campus. Not just live on campus. They're not going to let you attend as a student. The indirect expenses, though, with those, there's ways that you can bring those costs down just by being frugal. So that's like things like with textbooks, rent used textbooks. If you end up renting used textbooks, you can, bring down your cost of attendance and, just be frugal, be shopping at like Walmarts or even like Dollar Tree's awesome when you're in college. You can get a bunch of like random toiletries and stuff there. So just being smart about those indirect expenses, you can bring cut the cost down. But with those direct expenses, those are things that you have to pay whatever that price is to the institution in order to be a student there.
Yeah, so thank you so much. The reason,
You're welcome.
the reason I wanted to bring back cost of attendance is because typically this is something that as a student I wasn't aware of. But once students can't be awarded more money in scholarships than what the cost of attendance is. So I have had students who are like super go-getters. They go and they get all the scholarships, and yeah, they get those scholarships, but we have to remind them that there is a cap, and that is whatever the cost of attendance is at the college. Once their tuition and fees are paid for, anything else that they make, they can utilize it for those kind of like indirect expenses.
Miscellaneous living expenses,
Yeah.
books and supplies, transportation. But then, schools always have a cost of attendance. So once you have hit whatever that cost of attendance is, they're not going to keep getting you scholarships because at that point, you've already hit the cost of attendance of what they estimate that it's going to, it cost you to go to school there. They're not going to just keep shelling out money. But that's a great problem to have. So if you have that problem, that means you have been a great scholarship hunter. And speaking about, scholarships and stuff, we should probably start telling you how to actually find and apply for them.
Yeah.
When looking for scholarships, there's, again, kind of going back to the 4 sources of financial aid. There's the federal government, which is the Department of Education, the state government, which is, if you're in Illinois, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. Then there's every institution has their own institutional funds, so they own scholarships that they can award. And then outside and private scholarships. Outside and private scholarships are any places other than the first three that I mentioned. So that could be like local businesses, organizations, churches, community groups, things like that. Anyone who's offering some type of scholarship money to go to school. The best way to get the most bang for your buck is to dip into all four sources of aid. So make sure you're completing your FAFSA, because that is going to be checking, seeing if you are eligible for that state or federal aid. But then you also want to make sure that you are applying to colleges, because you have to apply typically to be able to get any kind of scholarship aid from them. Apply to the college. And this is where it's important to know how the specific colleges that you're applying to, how their scholarship situation works, because there's been some schools that say all you have to do is apply to our school and we will tell you what scholarship aid you qualify for just based off of what you included in your application. Other schools say we have we need your application, but then we have this totally separate pool of funds where you have to do separate applications to get them. So figure out how your school works, because if they have those separate applications that you have to fill out for scholarships, make sure you're doing that. But then lastly, Anna and I were talking about this beforehand, where we screwed up. We did not apply to, we did the first three, and we did not apply to any of those outside or private scholarships. We stopped after we, completed the FAFSA and, filled out institutional scholarships. We just ended there, which was dumb. And we probably both have more student loans than we could have if we were a little bit more proactive. But with those outside and private scholarships, the first place you want to look local, and don't be afraid to look at the small scholarships. So I would recommend starting where there's a small competition pool. If you're in high school, check with your college and career center, check with your counselor for local scholarships. Because again, if you are just competing against the people within your school, that is a much, much, much smaller pool than those national scholarships where you are competing with millions of students.
Not to be discouraged from applying from those big scholarships. It's just if you want the odds to be in your favor.
Yes.
You could also go for the smaller ones too.
And this is a personal opinion of mine, those like sweepstakes scholarships where it's like, just send a tweet and you'll be entered. I don't really count those as applying to scholarships, because if it takes you less than like 3 minutes to do it, everybody in the world is doing it. You should definitely, by all means, you can go ahead and do it. But like, don't, do 2 of those and be like, I'm done with my, outside private scholarship search, because odds are you're probably not going to get those scholarships. It's kind of like hitting the lottery.
Yeah. Maybe after that, no one will apply to the sweepstakes. Then you should apply to the sweepstakes.
Because I just discourage everybody. It's gonna be empty. So someone's got to seize the opportunity. So yeah, just looking out for you guys. Anna, do you want to talk about our favorite private scholarship search engine?
Well, I do, but I have
no, she doesn't.
Well, I wanted to talk about our student portal. We've been talking about it a lot, but this is where you could find what we're going to talk about, our favorite scholarship search engine. But also through the student portal, we talked about FAFSA being one of the ways that the state, one of the applications the state utilizes to know if they're going to award any money to students who need it financially, who shows financial need. But also on our student portal, we have some of the applications for other state programs and scholarships that we have available. So the ISAC student portal. And then we also have like a way to link to our favorite search engine, which is collegegreenlight.com/ISAC. Mm-hmm. And I am personally a huge fan of it. We keep talking about scholarships that are very competitive, they're hard to get. So the student would create a profile on collegegreenlight.com/ISAC, or go through our student portal if they don't want to type all that. They would go through our student portal, or they'll end up at College Greenlight.
One way or another.
One way or another. They'll create a profile. They should complete the profile as much as they can. It'll ask about their gender, their ethnicity. Because the reason why it asks so many questions is because then it'll give them scholarships that are specific to the student situation. I created a profile and it gave me scholarships that were only specific. If there was a scholarship that said that you needed to be Hispanic, it would only give me scholarships for that require that. So based on my profile, it did that. So after that, once you create the profile, it'll give you all of the scholarships that pertain to you based on your on your profile. And then the student can either see how competitive a scholarship is. They could filter it through how competitive it is. They can also filter it by how much work they have to put into it. And I love this because if the student is going on winter break, if they're going on Thanksgiving break, if they're on the weekend and they want to know, like, do I really want to commit to a scholarship that is going to require a lot of work from me, then they can look at that. And then they could also look at average. They could look at a scholarship that on average not very competitive and there's not a lot of work that they can put into it. And that would be an awesome scholarship to apply over the weekend if the student doesn't have a lot of time. So I personally love it. They can also they get like this drop down menu where they can select if they are interested in the scholarship or not, and if they're not interested in that scholarship, that they won't see it again.
And the nicest thing I think with College Greenlight is that all of the scholarships, because it's a partnership that we have through the state of Illinois, so all of the scholarships on there are vetted. And if you go to the if you go to collegegreenlight.com through our student portal, or if you type in collegegreenlight.com/ISAC, what's going to happen is it takes you to a version of it that doesn't have any proprietary or for-profit schools listed on there. So it's really nice because you can go on there and you can look at different scholarships, and then you're not going to get like ads and for-profit schools that are popping up while you're trying to do your scholarship search. And as Anna mentioned, that profile that you would go and put information in about yourself, it's all self-reported. So the more details that you can give, the more specific the scholarships are going to be towards your situation. And typically the better the results you're going to get. But keep in mind, if there is something you do not feel comfortable putting in there, you don't need to. It's all self-reported. And yeah, I think that with College Greenlight, the nicest thing about it is if you were to just like go and Google scholarships that you could potentially apply to, you have to open up all of these different scholarships, and then you have to read what the requirements are, and then half of them you're going to be like, oh, I'm not even eligible to apply to this. Whereas with collegegreenlight.com, after you complete your profile, it's going to generate you that list of scholarships that you are eligible to apply to based off of the information that you've already reported about yourself. So it makes it a lot simpler. It brings brings the list of scholarships you can apply to right to you. But I will say, don't just use collegegreenlight.com. By all means, do some footwork, check for local scholarships, because a lot of times College Greenlight does an excellent job of compiling scholarships, but there might be some more local scholarships or someone specific to the school, like your high school, that is not going to be on collegegreenlight.com. So it's a pretty comprehensive list, but not every single scholarship is going to be on there. So still be sure that you're looking for, additional scholarships outside of College Greenlight as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the nice thing with advertisement, because you mentioned it's free, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The nice thing with not seeing advertisement is that students won't see any scams, or students yourself, if you're looking for scholarships yourself. That's one of the things that we want people to be very careful about. One of the biggest things that I would hear about, and it kind of scares me, is that there were parents who were paying individuals to help them get scholarships. Scholarships should be free money. You shouldn't be paying in order to apply for them or to obtain free money, because if you're paying to obtain free money, then it's not technically free. So be aware of those scams, because they are out there.
And also just be aware and be wary anytime it's asking for like very private personal information. So like anytime it's asking for a social security number, I would check with your counselor. You can check with your local ISAC Corps member and just say, hey, before you provide it, do you know if this scholarship is legitimate or not? Because there are very few scholarships that ask you for that detail of information, like a social security number or things like that. So you definitely, if anytime you're applying to a scholarship and you see them asking for that type of personal information, get it checked to make sure it's legitimate before you actually provide that information.
Or if you're talking to an individual and they're promising you that they're going to get you money if you pay an amount, also check maybe if say they're part of an organization, check with your counselors, because oftentimes your counselors, your ISAC Corps members, they know your reps, they know about scams that are out there, because we hear about them so often, because we want to do what's best for parents. So they come to us letting us know any concerns. So just let them know and see, if it's a legit thing that you should be working with this individual.
Yeah.
But we do have ISAC Corps members out there who are doing this work for free. They help students with scholarships. They help students with writing scholarships. They don't write it for them, but they'll like proofread and guide them through it. So you should never pay for that type of work.
And on that too, work smarter, not harder. When you're applying for scholarships, keep all of your essays. Any essay that you have ever written for a college application or for a scholarship, keep them, because there's a lot of times that you might find a scholarship at one school where they say, hey, write about a time that you overcame adversity or something like that. And then you might be applying to a totally different school and they have a very similar prompt. In that case, you just have to proofread it, make sure that it still fits, but it makes it a lot easier if you can use the same core essay that you used for another one. So be sure you're saving all of that, and as long as it's your work and you're the one that wrote it, you can definitely, by all means, edit, keep most of it and then edit some of it just to make sure that you're fully addressing the question and use it for different scholarship opportunities.
And be sure, if you are doing that, be sure that if you, by any chance,
Yes.
you address a person or a school,
The
an
school's
institution,
name.
or a scholarship or an organization in your scholarship essay, that you edit that to fit, because you are able to utilize your work for other scholarships. Just make sure that you don't offend anyone by calling one institution by another name.
And I promise that's a really big way to get denied admission somewhere. If you're writing a college admissions essay for the U of I, and then you use that same essay to apply to UIC, and then, for UIC, it says, the reason I want to go to, U of I is, they're going to be next, because you didn't even say that you wanted to go to their institution. You had the wrong school name in there. So that is a giant red flag that will likely not end in you getting admitted to a school. So keep that in mind. Same with scholarships too, because if you're using the same essay, make sure you're actually rereading it. You're not just blindly copy pasting your essays everywhere. And definitely too, I think just kind of a final a note to close on, unless you have anything else with scholarships, is just you want to make sure, again, don't let it be something that you only do once. Make sure that every single year you're in college, you're applying to scholarships. That's something I'm kicking myself for not realizing. I thought it was freshman year you apply to scholarships, they're all renewable and that's the only thing that you do. That's not the case. You should apply for scholarships every year. And I know plenty of people. There's actually this really big DCFS scholarship. There was a girl that applied for it 2 years, got denied 2 years. The third year, she applied for it, she got it, and it ended up being a full ride for her for the next 2 years. So it's super important that you continue applying to scholarships every single year, and you don't just settle after freshman year. Or if you had to take out a decent amount in loans, apply for more scholarships, because the more scholarships that you apply for and you get awarded, the more you can dwindle down the amount you have to take out in loans.
Yeah. Well, I just want to mention one quick thing that I forgot.
We're just so excited on Halloween. We love spending our Halloween here. We are going to give you extra time.
Tuition waivers from employers. We don't think of them as scholarships, because we talked about, let's ask your employer if they have a scholarship, but what if they have a tuition waiver? Sometimes those big companies, I don't know if we're allowed to see them, but I'm a big coffee drinker. That big company, they offer tuition
That
waivers.
big company.
Your
The
cell
right
phone
one too,
company,
yeah.
if you're working, it depends on where you're going to be working. They offer tuition waivers, so look for that as well, because it might not look like a scholarship. The student might not receive it directly, but it is money that's going to count towards them, towards their education. So
Yeah, definitely be checking with your employers, because sometimes they have sneaky good scholarships that you've just never heard of. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We actually had a decent amount of viewers on this. It's probably because it's snowing outside and people are not, trick-or-treating or doing whatever you would do, because it is such cold weather. But have a happy, safe Halloween.
I want to say hi, Sam, and hi, Megan.
Oh, yeah. Hey, thanks for tuning in, guys. Glad to see there's no place you'd rather be than with us this Halloween.
Same.
Yes, but on that note, Anna, anything else you want to close us?
Oh, we're just going to leave the link to collegegreenlight.com, because obviously I want you guys to get there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's very true. We talked it up enough, so we'll leave that. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Yes.
Uh-oh. If I can end the video.
All right, right now we'll see you in.
See you again right now. Bye, guys.